Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome to not First Friday, it's actually Speed Dial tonight, but I use all my First Friday tricks and doodads. I'm actually doing this one from the studio because this is a very big and very important show. I have been chatting with folks. I see Matt Cundiff, Lone Star UAV, Sunrise Water Media, Ray Kelly, Gene Fox in the house, TJ Alexander in the house. We have another Metro Drones. It's DRONZ, so welcome Metro Drones. There's another Metro Drone, so that's Bill. Chris Hope in the house. Who else do we got? We had Joe Blaylock is here. Artco Drone Solutions. So thank you guys for joining. Very much appreciate it. And you're not going to regret it because this is going to be a really, really good and fascinating show because my guest that I have on tonight is actually someone that I think you're all going to be really interested in hearing from, learning from, etc. His name is Christian Mallico, and he is a author. He has written a book called FPV Flight Dynamics. I have been going through this thing, and I'll tell you, a lot of people think, oh, a book. Well, first of all, let me tell you, this book is heavy. So if you needed to defend yourself, if someone was attacking you, you could clunk them on the head with it. But the other cool thing about this book is you can actually, it'll stand up on its own. So it's more than just a coffee table book. This could be like any sort of table book. It works on this table. It's got a ton of illustrations in it, and it really does. It's not just directed to FPV necessarily. It's all about flight dynamics, which if you're interested in aviation at all is a really cool topic. So without further ado, let's go ahead and see if we can bring Christian in, and boom, there he is. How you doing?
Good. What's up, guys? Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thank you for being here. So Christian was actually introduced to me by Ken Heron, and I think it was around the time your book was coming out back in, I don't know, earlier this year. I know it came out last December, right?
Yeah, it was late December when I published it, and Ken Heron was actually the first guy that reached out to me and invited me onto his live stream.
Nice. And he, of course, has been wild about flying FPV for about the last 2 years. He got the bug big time. When I first met Ken, we were both just flying, DJI stabilized drones, and then we both kind of got into flying FPV. But I'll say that, he goes out to hang out with all the cool kids and the guys at Rotor Riot, and goes to, Le Drib and flying in bandos. Oh, he's way too old to use that word, honestly, and so am I. But he has a good time with it. And I got to say, I actually watched a couple of interviews with you, Christian, in preparation for this, and there was one where you were just describing, when you finally get over that sort of learning curve, what it's like to fly FPV. Can you just talk a little bit about that for a moment, how you got into it and when you had that aha moment of just loving it?
Yeah, definitely. But first things first, Ken Heron's an awesome guy. I got to hang out with him in person at Rotor Riot Rampage, and you're totally right. He's definitely a camera drone guy, and he's been integrating into the FPV community, and everybody loves him. I'm actually helping him with his upcoming book called Comment Below. He reached out to me and asked me to help him with publishing that. So again, Ken Heron, awesome guy, love him. He's the one that set me up with you, obviously, for this. So thanks to him for that. But to answer your other question, so I don't know, what is it like to get into FPV? Well, I've been flying for about 6 or 7 years now. I got into it maybe late 2014, early 2015, right around the time when the original Rotor Riot crew was assembling. So it was all, Mr. Steele, obviously, and it had Sharpoo, who unfortunately has been, lost to us for many years. But anyway, I was very, very much inspired by those guys. I would devour the content as it trickled out onto YouTube, and I just knew it was something immediately that I wanted to get into. And it was something that just immediately resonated with me. It kind of just ticked off all the boxes. I've always been really into kind of technical hobbies. I loved the electric guitar earlier when I was in my teenage years. And so I saw the drone, and it was something that I just understood. It was like, there's the technical aspect of learning to master it, and having that technical proficiency on the sticks, learning how to build them, how to tune them, how to customize them. But then also it's something that represents this creative outlet, for self-expression. And it really is kind of like a journey that you go on as a pilot to continue to get better. And then eventually, I mean, really the big call of FPV is that when you get to a certain level, the machine almost becomes this avatar, right? Through which you can kind of just transport your consciousness into, and it allows you to become something that's just so much greater than your everyday self. And it's incredibly, incredibly addicting.
I love that analogy too, of it being an avatar. What's really fun thing I did a long time ago, and I don't know if you've ever done this with FPV goggles, but you remember when DJI first came out with their goggles for OcuSync, that worked with the Mavic Pro, those big white ones.
Yeah, those big giant, yeah.
I put those things, I would put them on and actually put the drone behind a subject, like behind somebody who was wearing them, and then they would walk and you just kind of followed them like you were in a video game, which was kind of cool, because it was like that video game perspective, where you saw the avatar walking along. But, obviously, FPV has gone to a whole new level. I mean, those things were, I think, very early on in the digital process, right? They were trying to see like a proof of concept. Can we make digital goggles that will actually have a long range and all that sort of thing? And of course, Fat Shark has been one of the dominating players for a long time, and they've got Frostbite out now, I think. Have you tried Frostbite, by the way?
I tried it for the first time at Rotor Riot Rampage. Actually, it was a pretty fun application that they were using, because they were also at the same time testing out this sort of laser tag technology that they had.
Oh, yeah.
So they had these pre-built Cinewhoops, and they had the laser tag on it with the Fat Shark Bite Frost or Frostbite. That was my first and only experience with it, though.
What did you think?
Not as good as a DJI HD. I was analog forever. I was flying on it for about 6 years. I only just recently switched to the DJI system maybe 6 months ago, and I absolutely love it. And I would never go to anything else, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And I feel the same. I mean, they just as well. So when I started my channel, it was 2013 or 2014, when the original Phantom came out, and the Solo, remember the 3DR Solo when that came out? Those were kind of some of my original videos, and I would get sent FPV drones just, as a YouTuber and one of the first people doing drone content. I was getting sent a lot of them from like GearBest and Banggood and, all these companies in China, and it was cool. I was like, hey, this is kind of a fun little thing. But honestly, I always had a hard time having much range with digital. I think unless you really got your antennas dialed in right, and your transmission power, your wattage set up correctly, and there's no interference, and you got everything positioned correctly, I would find I'd be flying, and then all of a sudden I couldn't see anymore, and it was frustrating. And then about a year and a half ago, I got the DJI system, and just such a huge difference, and it made a huge difference in my love of FPV. Like, all of a sudden I was like, okay, I get it now. I see why people love this. And I know people can dial in analog systems. There's a lot of people in this chat who have analog systems that do a great job with it and fly just fine. But I'm like you. If digital's available, that's what I want to do. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it really does. And honestly, like, again, as a guy who was flying for that many years, when I put the goggles on my face and I flew for the first time, it was like being born again. It really was like this religious experience where I was like discovering FPV all over again. I know that sounds crazy, but I also switched the TBS Tracer at the same time, which has just insanely low latency. So like I just felt so intimately connected with the quad, and it was just, it was awesome. I fell in love with FPV all over again, to be honest with you.
And so you have obviously written this book, and I love the title of it, because you could have gone with a lot of other titles, but Flight Dynamics to me is like, that kind of piqued my interest right out of the gate, because that's something that really is about aviation and about physics and about, like, input and output. You do something and how it reacts. And you and I were talking a little bit earlier before the show about how you like to fly freestyle, because you like how that weight allows you to kind of use momentum to do tricks and stuff like that. Tell me about the inspiration for this book. I mean, when did you start thinking about it? When did you publish all that stuff?
So it was never really my intention, first of all, to actually write a book. I was trying to found a tech hardware company, and I was looking to develop a particular product that was associated with FPV. Long story short, just didn't wind up working out. But in the periphery of working on the actual physical product, I was creating sort of other assets that would be used to sort of be part of the unboxing experience when the customer would receive their their products. So anyway, it was something that would be almost like a video gaming manual. It was kind of just supposed to be like kitschy, tongue-in-cheek and fun, just sort of like equating the fact that FPV drones are like a real-life video game. So anyway, I was developing something like that, just a very small like pamphlet essentially, and then eventually, I guess you could say, I just sort of pivoted into writing the book. And to be honest with you, with the whole pandemic thing, it worked out for me just because there was no distractions, and I was basically just able to lock myself in a room for 12 hours straight, day in and day out, for about a year to get this thing fully published. But yeah, the whole thing, really was like a learning process for me too. So I wrote the whole thing, I edited it, illustrated everything in it. I formatted the entire thing for print, so I had to teach myself how to use Adobe Illustrator. So every single word and every single image in the book was placed on the page by me, which was an incredibly tedious process. Yeah, and then I had to learn about how to actually turn a PDF file into a print ready thing that you can just send off to a printer or to Amazon's KDP service so that they can actually turn it into a real book. So it was a very long process.
And when you got the first copy in your hands, when it arrived in the mail or whatever, what was that like to open it up? Because I have to say, when I opened this box and saw this, I was impressed. It has heft. It's so colorful. It's bright. It's just the diagrams. But what was your feeling when you opened it and brought it out of the box?
Yeah. The thing is pretty damn big. It's 8.5 by 11 because that was really the only size that was going to work, because I knew that it, you can't teach. FPV itself is something that's incredibly visual, so it's impossible to try and, explain in words things that you need to understand. So I knew this is going to have a lot of illustrations, and they're going to have to be very detailed, and they're probably going to have to be quite large. So that was the only size that was going to work, and it's 280 pages. I think the book actually weighs about 3 pounds. But yeah, when I got it in my hands for the first time, it was kind of like a surreal experience, because it was something that I just lived in for basically 12 months, and then to finally open it up and pull the thing out and to hold it in my hands, and it was a finalized product was it's a pretty surreal experience.
And did you find yourself catching or checking your Amazon sales every day, every minute, to see if something sold?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And well, yeah, what's great about it and terrible is that it updates almost immediately. So when somebody purchases a copy, I see a tick on it. So yeah, nice. I was pretty obsessive about watching it, and yeah, but it's actually done really well. So now, like I was telling you off stream, I just hit the 6-month mark. So it's been in publication for 6 months now, and has sold over 3,000 copies worldwide. So it's been doing really, really well for a self-published title, and I'm just really happy with it.
Yeah, I actually was looking at the reviews, and the only negative review I saw, because I always like to read the best review and the worst review, just to get some balance, was somebody complaining about the ebook version, and I think it's for exactly what you said. There's diagrams and there's all that stuff that you need to be able to see, right? So it probably is better in a page, at least for old guys.
Yeah, that's I prefer the printed experience, just because I like printed books. The ebook itself, yeah, with Amazon Kindle, not to get too technical, but Amazon's Kindle platform, it really sucks, and they really limit what you can actually do. So the book, at least on the Amazon Kindle for PC version, is basically a PDF file, because they like romance novels, so they want something that is just all text, and that can be reflowable, as it's called. But for a textbook like this, it's perfectly fine. You can open it up and you can read it, but this is not something that you're going to want to read on your phone, because you're going to have to blow it up. It's definitely something that you would have to read on a laptop or a monitor.
Well, and let me also say that just, as nerdy as people look in FPV goggles, and you admit we look pretty nerdy, I think you look cool as hell reading this thing. Like I just want to go somewhere and just have this open, at the airport or something, and have people see me reading it. I might not even be reading it. I'll just be looking at the pictures. And again, ton of illustrations. I am sincere that this book is very well done and interesting to look at. It almost, like I said, it's kind of fun to skip around in. What is your thought on this for camera drone folks? Because we have a lot of camera drone folks in our audience tonight.
Well, the book is most definitely geared towards learning how to fly in acro mode. So acro mode goes by a variety of different names: acro mode, rate mode, manual mode, as it's called now on the DJI FPV drone. They all mean the same thing. It's distinctly different from the way that you would control a drone with angle mode. If you're in the camera drone crowd and you are looking to get into acro, then this is something that would definitely be beneficial to you, because I did write it in such a way where I wanted to explain in a lot of detail what are the differences between a camera drone, that category of kind of camera consumer drone, think your DJI Phantom, etc., versus what is an FPV mini quad. What are the differences between these two machines, and then ultimately what are the differences in the ways that the flight controller is going to interpret your stick inputs and generate physical outputs in the air. So I go into pretty great detail explaining side by side, like, this is what angle mode does, this is what acro mode does, this is how it's different. These are some of the pitfalls that you're going to experience when you're, transitioning from angle to acro.
Like
as an example, like crashing. Yeah, I mean, that's something that you're going to have to just get used to and accept. But like angle mode in particular, a lot of people get confused when they switch over to acro because they want to hold the stick forward in a deflected position to continue to command the drone to go forward. But now when you're doing this in acro mode, it's continuously transmitting a rotational input, so it's constantly causing the quad to flip over. That's something that throws a lot of experienced camera drone pilots for a loop when they're trying to make that transition.
It is I mean, it is a big leap to go from angle to rate mode or acro mode. But I will say it's kind of weird, because I can remember before I was comfortable flying in acro, and I'd done some FPV in angle and even in horizon mode, right, where you could flip, but it still would stabilize for you, which was a lot of people say it's a bad habit. It kind of, it's like a crutch that you get used to, and I'll freely admit that. But I can remember talking to FPV pilots saying, yeah, once you get into flying in acro mode, angle feels very restrictive. Like, it's hard to fly in angle mode. And I was like, what are you talking about? Angle mode is so easy. And now I get what they mean. If I take off and I'm in angle mode, I'm like, why isn't the drone behaving like I expect it to? It's just this weird thing. And you and I were talking earlier. How did you go from how did you get good at flying in acro? What does it take?
For me, what really made the difference for me, and this is one of the biggest arguments that I made in my book, is that the fastest path to acro mastery is going to be specifically through simulated racing. So, I mean, that's nothing mind-blowing. That's really kind of very common advice that's parroted by a lot of people in the FPV community. They always say, like, hey, first thing you need to do, you got to get yourself a transmitter and then buy yourself a license to a simulator and then get in the sim. But oftentimes I think where that advice falls short is, okay, you got someone who's motivated, they're in the sim, and then they're like, now what do I do? How do I use this incredibly powerful tool to my advantage? And the one thing that I consistently hammer in the book is that if you want to get really good, really fast, the best thing that you can do is get yourself on a racetrack and practice racing, because it's the best way to receive that immediate and objective feedback on your performance. I talk to a lot of newer pilots and they're like, yeah, I go in the sim and then I practice freestyle, which usually means they load up a map and then they kind of just start noodling around for half an hour.
Hitting gaps and diving stuff and whatever they're trying to do.
Yeah, but like quite literally hitting the gap, not actually getting through it.
Yeah.
And they find themselves doing the same things over and over again. But when you get onto a racetrack, the way I describe it in the book is that even if you have no intention whatsoever of learning or being a competitive racer, and I don't blame you, I've never flown in a competitive live race myself, and nor do I ever really want to. I like to freestyle. And so even if you don't want to race, it's still the best way to do it. And the reason is because you got to think about the racetrack as almost like this three-dimensional puzzle. So obviously there's checkpoints. You have to hit them in a certain way and in a certain order. But what it's doing is essentially defining this three-dimensional line that is snaking through, three-dimensional space. And your job as the pilot is then to sort of unlock that line, to find the flow that the track designer has encoded into the track. And then you have to have, the competency, the actual, physical skills on the sticks to follow that line. And the beauty of it is that, if you go into a simulator like Velocidrone, for instance, which has an amazingly large track library in the thousands, you can be constantly presented with all of these different puzzles. It's like, if you're a guy that likes to do Sudoku or whatever, crossword puzzles, you can find tons of different puzzles for you to do. Think about it the same way as a track.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just want to say real quick, Marcel Off Axis FPV had a $2 Canadian super chat. I think it's Canadian. So, oh, Canada, my native home and land. There you go. Thank you very much. He said he just bought the book in paperback. The book is linked below in the description if you want to check it out on Amazon. And so it's available. You can order it. It'll show up pretty quickly. You were talking a minute ago, though, about Velocidrone. Is that your favorite, or is there a reason you like Velocidrone, or have you flown DRL or Liftoff or any of the others?
I have pretty extensive experience in all of the simulators. You mentioned pretty much all of them. Also, there's also DCL now. I have probably over 1,000 hours of stick time in Velocidrone, but I have several dozen hours of stick time in all of the other ones, so I'm pretty well experienced in them. Velocidrone is the one that I always go back to, and quite honestly is the one that I recommend people go to. It's the one that just feels right to me.
Most natural, like physics.
Yeah. It doesn't. It's hard to describe. It feels like it takes your stick inputs and it very accurate. Well, that's what a simulator does, but it very accurately just makes it the screen move the way that you want it to. When I'm in like DRL's sim or Liftoff sim, I feel like they're trying to simulate aspects or variables of flight, and it's not really coming through. It feels drifty to me. When I fly in those simulators, I feel like I'm flying a Greyhound bus through molasses, but when I'm in Velocidrone, it's very tight, it's very crisp. And that's the one where if I have a good session in Velocidrone and immediately go out into the field, I feel those skills transfer immediately. The other ones I don't necessarily get the same. Plus, I think Velocidrone is just the one that has the most community engagement. And like I said, by far, it has the most tracks within its library. So that's the one that I recommend everyone go with.
I gotta try it. And would you say, if somebody's already flying DRL or Liftoff, that's not a bad thing, right? It's still gonna improve your skills.
Yeah, no, there's nothing. It's better than not flying for sure. But if you're asking me what's my recommendation, I would say go with Velocidrone. But if you got DRL or Liftoff and you're happy with it and it's working for you, stick with it. Maybe try Velocidrone rather. It's not that expensive. I think all of them are only like, either a $10 or a $20 download license.
Get them on Steam or actually, I think a couple of them are now available on Xbox, which I actually tried to play a couple of them on Xbox, and it really doesn't work very well with the Xbox controller. Like you need a legit, Tyrannus or something to fly with. I should send you something my son did. My son actually did a 10-day challenge. This was about a year ago. He had never done any of the sims and had never flown Acro FPV, and we did it in DRL. And part of the reason is because we watch DRL and we're fans of the entire spectacle and the racers, and it's cool to get to fly on actual real courses that they flew in. Like the BMW World in Munich that we got to we actually went there when we were in Germany and saw it. We watched it on DRL and then we flew in it in the sim, so that was pretty neat. But my son did 10 days. I think he did one called the Gates of Hell, and it's a kind of shipyard with all these shipping containers and a big bridge. You know which map I'm talking about on DRL?
Yeah, I've flown it.
Yeah, so you go through these shipping containers. It's not a real hard one, but first time around, I think it took him 7 minutes to get all the way around it. And in stabilized or beginner mode, at the end he did it under a minute in pro mode, which I guess is the equivalent to rate mode. It was pretty cool.
And again, that's really the power of getting on the track and doing that, because you're receiving that feedback on it. Like, okay, it took me 7 minutes to do it. Now it only takes me 1 minute. That's immediate objective feedback, and that you're getting better at it, as opposed to just kind of going in and like, I don't know, I'm going to do a split S over a tree and maybe kind of come out of it. Like, there's no way to say, was that better than the last one that I did? You know, get on the track. That's the best way to get better for sure.
And you also don't break your drone. You know, you just flip a switch and it resets, and you don't have to go find it and you know, try to turtle mode it or get it out of a tree or whatever the case may be. Well, that's awesome. I do recommend everybody, you know, at least give it a try. Find a friend who's got a simulator. And it's one of those games where it isn't clearly the objective, unless you're doing a race, you know, where you're racing against other people. The objective isn't always very easy to start with. And by that I mean, when I first got the DRL sim was the first one I downloaded and started playing with, and I was kind of overwhelmed with how much stuff there was you could do, number one. And then when I did join a race and I was racing against people, I was just getting clobbered. It was no fun. You know, it was just like, you've been lapped 3 times and you're done. So first thing I did was just try to kind of get used to flying a little bit. And then the second thing I did was kind of like my son, just did the same course over and over again, just until I could finally get through it decently. And then it started to get more fun. It's not something that's really, especially if you're not an FPV pilot, it's not something that is fun right out of the gate. It's a little bit of work to get to that point, would you say?
I would completely agree. FPV is something that can be insanely frustrating and a very punishing hobby. But, you know, on the other side of that, if you have the perseverance and you really dedicate yourself to it, you can get to a pretty good level pretty quickly. And the reward of FPV is something that is definitely worth the effort. You know, whatever it is that draws you, whoever you are out there, you see these videos of other people doing it, and you have this inkling, this thought of, God, what must it feel like to be able to do that? Whatever you think that feels like, trust me, it's 1,000 times better when you actually get to that level and you can go out to the field, you put the goggles on, and you just have this immediate connection to your machine, and it's just there to carry you. And you can have these amazing out-of-body experiences with, you know, technology that just sits in your backpack. And then one of the great things about it too is that you can record those experiences and have the ability to share it with other people. It's a truly rewarding hobby. And
there's a whole community, again, just like camera drones, and sort of parallel to and in conjunction with camera drones, there's this community of people that fly FPV, and there's a community of people that do both, and there's a community of people that do camera drones. And so, you know, to be able to share your flights, like you said, especially when you're getting better and people can see it, that's a lot of fun. I have 2 questions for you that I don't want to forget to ask. Number one, and actually, I actually don't know the answer to this. I probably should, but do you think that people flying FPV, if they are flying a quad that's over 250 grams, will have to do the trust test? You know, you know what I'm talking about? This new, basically it's for hobbyists. It's a little online test you're supposed to take before you go fly any drone.
Right. I'm not up to date on that. I've seen it come out, but I haven't really invested much time in studying it, to be honest with you.
I'm in the same boat. I'm kind of curious if anybody in the chat knows if that applies to sort of non-camera drones flying at low level. I mean, the thing is, you don't really generally fly an FPV drone very high, right? You want to stay close to gaps and going through stuff and stuff like that. And then my second question is, what is your opinion of the DJI FPV drone as, first of all, just as a quad, just one to fly? You know, it's certainly a different animal, and I could tell you mine all day long, but I'm curious what yours is. And then number 2, on that same question, do you feel like it is a good starting point for someone just getting into FPV to be able to go from flying in stabilized to acro on the same drone pretty easily?
Okay, so the DJI FPV drone it's a loaded topic. Let me start this off with a disclaimer by saying that I am actually a bit of a DJI fanboy myself. I love their HD goggles. I do own a Phantom. I do own a Mavic. I absolutely love their products. That being said, I don't want to come across as sounding like just a massive FPV drone snob, but the DJI FPV drone is one that I would say that it's quite literally the worst drone you could possibly buy if you're serious about getting into FPV acro.
Okay, that's not mincing words there.
No, it's not. And you know what? I've said this on other interviews too before, and it's like my issue with it is that, like, for a company like DJI, who has just infinite resources at their disposal and a total army of engineers and product designers, when they come out with something like their FPV drone that really misses the mark, It's like when your dad says, you know what, son, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. I'm disappointed that they didn't actually focus on solving the true problems that are inherent with flying FPV. And so basically like this, to sum it up, there's two major problems right now with getting into FPV, right? So it's basically, well, getting into FPV, so purchasing all of the gear that you need to get to actually just get up in the air for the first time, right? And that's comprised of 5 components. You got to get your goggles, your LiPo batteries, your charger, you got to have a drone, and then you've got to have your transmitter. So in that respect, it's a very difficult hobby to get into.
Lawn chair.
Right, and your lawn chair, exactly. It's difficult to buy all that stuff and to make sure that it's going to be compatible and work. What the DJI FPV drone does, it makes it nice so that with the swipe of one credit card, you can get all of that gear in one shot, and pretty much in the same afternoon, you can be up in the air and you can be flying. But I mean, that's not necessarily anything new either, because it's essentially just a glorified RTF ready to fly package. It's certainly the most polished and professional one that's ever been released. So it's got that. Now, the second problem with FPV is that once you get in the air, it's really, really difficult to stay in the air. And obviously that's associated with the fact that you're going to crash your drone very often. You're going to do damage to it. So the DJI FPV drone is, essentially made of glass. You're going to crash that thing probably within, the first 10 minutes really of flipping it into manual mode. And then what have you got? You've got a really expensive paperweight. It's going to cost you $250 to send the thing back out to do minor repairs, like what should be a minor repair, like replacing an arm. So you're just never, ever, ever going to be able to learn Acro on that drone. That's ultimately the problem with it, is that it doesn't really solve any problems for the customer. That's my beef with the DJI drone.
You don't think there's value in getting it and being able to fly in sport mode, say, just to get, especially for someone, and I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate, but asking the question, for someone who's never flown FPV before, to be able to put it on, get used to what it feels like to be in the goggles, because that is actually a learning curve in itself, right? I can remember the first few times flying analog FPV back in 2017, 2016, feeling very nauseous. And it took me a little while to kind of, my brain kind of got used to it. And so then I got to where I could do it. But do you think there's value in that, in just being able to actually fly it in sport mode, getting used to that, if you know that you're going to try and go on to Acro with a different drone?
If we're talking about like pound for pound value, no, I'd say no. If spending, I don't know I forget what the FPV package costs, like $1,400 maybe.
Yeah.
If you want to get the experience of flying an Acro and being under the goggles, you might as well just buy like a little Nano. There's DJI or there's HD Nanos that you can buy now that are, literally fit in the palm of your hand. It doesn't have enough power to damage itself under its own, with its own weight. So I would say just get yourself a smaller nanocopter and fly around in that. There's really no need for you to go out and buy, something like the FPV drone.
The first one that I got into was actually exactly what you're talking about. It was a package I got from Gep RC, and it was the Rocket. I don't know if you've ever seen the Rocket, but it's a little, ducted 4S quad that came with, and at the time I didn't have goggles, I didn't have digital goggles or the control, and it has a full air unit in it, and binding it was pretty easy. But you're right, it was something I was able to break the prop guards on, break the props, replace motors. It's pretty, it is much easier to fix, and that was exactly what you're saying. And then from there, after you have the goggles and the remote, then, like you said, the world is your oyster as far as FPV stuff, if you want digital, because then you can get these ready to fly, bind and fly quads that are 6S quads or bigger, smaller, these sort of real ultralight cruisers, toothpick quads, etc., that all will bind with that remote and the goggles. And then if you want to get into a more sophisticated remote, you can do that as well. So I know what you're saying. It's like I would say one thing I was disappointed in the DJI FPV drone is that it only works with it's a very closed system, right? If the remote worked with the old air unit, that would be so much cooler, and if the goggles worked with the old, I guess the goggles do work with the old air unit, but you know what I mean. Right.
Yeah. It is just stuck in its own closed system. So, I mean, yeah, I think the goggles would work with an air unit. I'm not 100% sure on that. I'm not a huge tech guy, to be honest with you.
I think they do. So, what do you have a recommendation? Like, is there a ready-to-fly kit that you recommend for people if they're just kind of starting out, or maybe they've done a little bit of sim?
I mean, for an RTF kit, honestly, I don't know. Just check out Bardwell's channel, or even go to fpvknowitall.com. He's got a really great FPV shopping list that you can go to. I'm sure there's an awesome recommendation for it there. I mean, but really, kind of, it's like we're just sort of beating around the bush of the actual topic, which is like, you're going to have to learn how to build these things ultimately. If you really want to be successful in FPV, you got to kind of bite that bullet. You have to have, some level of proficiency with soldering, and you're going to have to spend quite a bit of time, unfortunately, trying to figure out how to get all these damn things to come together. Because really, at the end of the day, it's the only way that legitimately addresses the issue of, you're going to crash a lot, you're going to break stuff, you're going to have to learn how to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So, I mean, you can get as many RTFs, BNFs, DJI FPV drones as you want, but eventually you're just going to run smack dab into that wall of, I don't have a functioning quad to work with. I need to be able to repair it myself. I mean, it's just an inescapable reality of what FPV is. Well, and that's really what's holding the hobby back at this point.
It seems like it's gotten easier. It seems like things have become, I guess, with the all-in-one flight controllers, right? And having the ESCs built in instead of being out on the arms and stuff like that. Do you think it's easier today to build and/or repair a quad than it was 3 years ago?
Oh yeah, most definitely. And especially, I use dedicated flight stacks all the time. So I love T-Motor products, actually. So I use the T-Motor F7 with their Pro 60 amp 4-in-1 ESC, and it's also designed to work. I use the digital version, so I mean, it's pretty great. It has ribbon cables that come in. It's designed to just plug right into the air unit, so you don't have to worry about soldering up your video camera. The only soldering that you would have to do is then to, the motors to the ESC pads, the XT60, and then your receiver. So, I mean, there's still soldering involved, but everything is nice and compact. And once you get, a certain setup that you like, you can kind of just keep buying the same pieces and working off of those. One of the frames, if anyone's interested in actually getting a frame, a really solid trainer frame, like good day in, day out workhorse frame, is going to be the TBS Source 1. So it's an open source frame that's constantly being iterated upon. And for the money, you really cannot get anything better than the Source 1, because I think it's like $27 for a full frame. And the thing is kind of like a tank.
Wow.
It's no thrills, no frills, but I mean, if you want something to train on, like the analogy that I always make, listen, if you're going to start learning how to play guitar or something, you basically just need an instrument that's like, jack of all trades, essentially. You want a Fender Stratocaster, just the normal 6-string that's easy to keep in tune. You can pick it up, you can play it, you can put it down. TBS Source 1 is a great frame for that. Eventually, once you get your freestyle chops up, you can figure, all right, what is it that I really want to do? And then you can kind of branch off and start, customizing it. But if you want just a tank of a frame to learn on, TBS Source 1 can't beat it for the money.
Nice. And I assume you can put digital or analog on it, either one?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, for sure. And again, because it is so widely used and it is an open source project, there are tons and tons and tons of TPU accessories that will go with it. So I mean, you can find TPU mounts for your GoPro, anything and everything you can find.
Insta360 or the little Go camera or whatever. Yeah. No, and I think that is one other aspect. Not only is it easier now with you were talking about ribbon cables that you can plug in versus having to solder, that sort of thing, but also there's so many more resources online now, right? I mean, first of all, you've got this great book if you want to learn. But second of all, you've got, like you said, Bardwell's channel, you've got Team Black Sheep, you've got all these resources you can go to find the parts you need, and there is almost a guarantee that someone's already done what you are trying to do and made a video about it, right? That's really the beautiful thing about YouTube in general is, hey, I need to know how to change the water filter in my Westinghouse refrigerator, Oh, well, somebody made a video about it, right? I mean, it's right there. You could just find it and go do it. So I made a video years ago on my personal YouTube channel about how to peel a pomegranate, and it got thousands of views, and I had no subscribers, but apparently people look for that all the time. It's a very searchable topic. So you talked about flying FPV. You do have the book. You do have some socials. People should definitely go check out your socials. You have a YouTube channel. What's on your YouTube channel? Why should people go over there and subscribe?
Well, YouTube channel is VESPULA FPV. I'm kind of doing things backwards, you like like we were talking about offline. You should probably have like some sort of social media following first, and then you can transition into publishing a book of some sorts. But I really had no social media exposure up until this point, so I wrote a book, and now I'm sort of backpedaling, trying to like get a social media following from it. But anyway, I only have about 215 subscribers at this point. I have I don't know, about 10 videos up, and I'm trying to focus more obviously on things in my wheelhouse. So I'm doing kind of in-depth acro tutorials at this point. I've done some stuff in the simulator where I'm talking, and the style I guess I'm trying to go for is sort of like, your guitar teacher on Saturday morning. I'd like to just kind of be able to sit down and do longer style videos where you can actually kind of get into something, as opposed to just like, hey, listen, we got this thing for 5 minutes. Let me show you this, and like, on to the next one. I prefer more of a, a little slower, more of a drawn out style. Yeah. Where I can kind of like, slower pace and go into more detail and talk about, what it is that I want to get across.
So totally aside, as a musician, as a guitar player, do you ever watch Rick Beato?
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I'm sorry, man.
It's spelled Beato, Beato. His first name is Rick. But he does these things where he breaks down songs, and he calls it what makes this song great. And he basically, and they're long videos, they're like 30, 40 minutes, but he'll take a popular song, something by the Cars or by Queen or by, it's mostly classic rock stuff. And then he'll like talk about every single element of the song, the drums, the guitar, the backing vocals, the bass. And it's so cool. I mean, I find it, I play a little bit of guitar. I'm probably about as bad a guitar player as I am FPV pilot, but I enjoy both things. But yeah, definitely worth checking out Rick Beato if you like those long form, like they're not really tutorials. They're more just, he makes you, much like this book, I will say, because this book does the same thing. He makes you notice things you didn't notice before about a song, Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever listened to a song that you never really liked, and then all of a sudden it clicks and you're like, hey, this is actually a really great song. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah. Yeah, no, but I totally love that style too. I like when someone who knows a lot about something takes the time to really break it down and go in depth on it. Like, I don't know. I've always been into that. Like, I got a subscription to masterclass.com, and like they got all this cool content on there.
Yeah.
Like, I'll watch like an hour-long thing about, like, I hate cooking, for instance. I suck at cooking. I don't like cooking, but I'll watch an hour-long show on like a master chef talking about cooking, because I find it so interesting to hear someone who's like really good at something kind of break it down and sort of, make those connections to it. I love that style.
I have the same. So when the pandemic started, actually, that was something my wife and I did. We were like, okay, we're watching a lot of crappy TV. Let's try to take it up a level. So we subscribed to Masterclass. I think if you buy it for the year, it's like $120. So it works out to about $20 a month or something. So, if you watch 3 or 4 of them, it's worth it. Anyway, gardening. There's a dude, I don't know if you've seen this one, but he's like the urban gardener or something, and he cusses up a storm during the whole show. He's just like, he's really raw and cusses a lot, and but not in a bad way. It's just he does it for emphasis. But it was so fascinating to talk about turning dirt into soil, right? And then turning soil into nutrients, and nutrients into plants, and plants into food. It blew me away. So sorry.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one, but I got to check it out now.
Well, and then I don't know, the guy that does the ukulele on Masterclass. My son was watching that. He's kind of in this ukulele thing right now, and so he was just watching. Like, he basically learned how to play 2 or 3 songs after one of the classes. It's just real simple stuff. So,
awesome.
So again, people who do have hesitations about getting into flying acro, like I actually saw Matt Cundiff earlier, who is a big part of this community, great guy. He said something about not interested in flying acro. I feel like that's one of those things that it's almost like there is such this barrier that you may not want to invest the time in it. Why should people take the time to learn how to fly Acro and to learn how to build and repair their own drones?
I don't blame anyone who wouldn't want to do it, because there are significant barriers to entry, and there are, a lot of learning curves that you have to go through, and there's a lot of things that you have to learn that are just tangentially associated with FPV drones that really have nothing to do with flying them. And I completely understand anyone's position that says, this is too much. And I'll be honest with you, as a guy who's been in it for 7 years, who wrote a damn book about it, like, there have been times where I've been on the bench and like nearly brought to tears with frustration, because it can be that punishing. But on the flip side of that, I think what the true allure of what FPV is again, that it kind of, it promises you that ability to just sort of become something other. And it's really difficult to describe the kind of experiences that you can have with it. I know I wax poetic on it and I talk very, in flowery language about, but to me, like, FPV has very little to do with flying drones. And that was kind of one of the major points that I constantly talked about in the book, is that it's really about using the technology as a medium to, explore the environment in such a way that human beings really have been dreaming of doing since the dawn of time. I mean, now we do have that technology. Unfortunately, you can't feel the wind on your face. You can't feel, it. You can't feel it in your gut when you're going down a dive, but you can see it. I can go out now, and I have the skill. And like I said, you have all the technology in a single backpack. I can go anywhere now, and I can just put my goggles on. I can put a quad up in the air, and now that's me up there. It's no longer me sitting in the chair. That machine that you see buzzing through the trees, that is like my point of consciousness at that point.
Yeah, and
it's a physical extension of my very thoughts at that point.
Much like augmented reality or VR goggles, you do tend to lose awareness of the rest of the world. It's actually it's funny, because I'll go out to Canyon Vista, this place I fly a lot, and a few of the folks in the chat have flown there with me. At Canyon Vista, you'll be there. I'll be under these trees by myself, and I'll hear, I'll be flying, and I'll hear like a car go by or something snap behind me, like somebody stepping on something, and it'll just, like, all of a sudden I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sitting here at Canyon Vista. I'm not in the air over the field. You know what I mean? It's like you get that snap back to reality, to quote Eminem, I think. It's pretty crazy how that happens. And if you ever wanted to steal somebody's stuff, go do it while they're flying FPV, right? Just walk up and be quiet, be as quiet as you can. Especially, I know some folks like Justin Davis and Ken Dono, who throw the earbuds in while they're flying a lot. So they're totally immersed. That's where you need not only your visual line of sight, your what do they call it? Visual observer, but you also need someone just to watch your back.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it really is like an out-of-body experience, and that was something that really connected with me when I first saw it, because I've always been someone who's like, I've been interested in, like the human consciousness, topics like, out-of-body experiences, astral projection, lucid dreaming, that kind of stuff. I've always been very interested in that. So when I saw FPV, I was like, oh, I get it. I made that connection, that parallel. It's not necessarily what it means for everyone who flies FPV, but it is what it means for me. And the drone is really nothing more than this medium through which I can have those kinds of experiences, and that's what I love about FPV. So
and you mentioned about lucid dreaming. Not to go off on too much of a tangent, but I know for me, the very first thing I do when I realize I'm dreaming is fly. Like it's just like, oh, this is a dream. I can fly. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's what, if you've had that experience, but that's just like, that's how I know I'm in a dream is the minute I'm flying. And then I'm always wondering, I'm like, maybe this isn't a dream. It feels really real, or maybe I'm just flying FPV and Kai's going to come up behind me and steal my backpack. You never know with those things. Are you, you are currently in Connecticut, right? Kind of up further north, away from all the heat. Where is your favorite place to go fly, or what are some good experiences you've had with locations to go fly in, like mountains, beaches, bandos? What do you like to go do?
There's a lot of decent spots around here. For me personally, I like flying in nature. I really don't like going to bandos, and I don't like flying over concrete, just because I think it's ugly, and also I don't want to smash my quad into it. But I really just love park flying. So I love going through trees, around bushes. There's a spot that's not too far from me. It's like literally 3 minutes down the road that I go to very, very often. And actually, that was another point that I made in my book. I was talking about how important it is for you to control the controllable. So there's a number of variables that you always want to keep consistent if your end goal is to just, achieve the largest incremental gain in skill with the least amount of time as possible. You always want to keep your camera angle, your rate profile, your mini quad setup all the same, but then also you want to fly the same environment over and over again if you can, just because it's something that gets you. You don't have to worry about, okay, I'm at a new spot. Are there power lines? Are people going to walk in on me? Like, where can I go? Where can't I go? If you go to the same spot over and over again, and you have dedicated practice sessions there, you hit the ground running on pack one. You plug in, and then you're ready to go. There's no wasting time. Like, is there scraggle under that tree? Can I dive under it? You already know, and you can just hit the ground running on pack one. So go to the same spot if you can find one.
And the big one for me is switch settings. Like I have where I like all my switches, and I don't know if you ever like swap drones with somebody else and their switches are different, and you're trying to cut the power or switch rates or something, and it's different switch, and you're like, oh, I just cut the power when I was trying to change back into angle or whatever. It is kind of funny.
I did that the other day. I was out with a buddy, and he had like a 6-inch Apex, and it was on, a different transmitter and obviously different switches. And he handed over it to me, and I was trying to fly this thing, but I was just babying it around because it's somebody else's quad. And then I land, and he's like, "Dude, you got to disarm it." And I'm like, scrambling for the switches.
Which one is it? So one thing that I would recommend to people, and I have recommended this, again, the GEP RC rocket was a great starter for me. It was one that I was able to get with the entire, ready to fly kit. It was, it's got a full air unit in it. There's a Rocket Light, which has the Caddx unit in it, but it's a 4S. And so what do you think about, do you have a preference flying 6S versus 4S, or do you feel like they have different applications, or what's your thought on that?
I flew, 4S was always standard up until 6S became sort of standard. So I was on 4S for a really long time. And then I made the switch over to 6S, which was kind of like a religious experience because it was just so much more powerful. I mean, obviously how 4S and 6S is going to feel is obviously very dependent upon, the motors that you're using, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're getting into FPV, I might recommend that you would start on a 4S battery, just because, not that it's necessarily less powerful, but it's going to be a little bit less weight.
Cheaper.
And it's also going to be cheaper. Exactly. So you can buy more batteries. Eventually, if you really want to get into, like true FPV Acro, like 6S is pretty much where it's at right now.
It is funny because I had only flown 4S and 4S and 4S until it was about not last September, but the September before, and I was allowed to fly someone else's, so I was kind of being careful with it. And you're right, it was just like, whoa, this is so much more powerful and so much more. I actually find with FPV that quads that are bigger are easier to fly a little bit. You know what I mean? Like flying tiny whoops inside is pretty challenging, especially trying to do it in acro mode. You really bump into stuff and get lost behind furniture. But going from that 4S to that 6S was awesome. You need a lot of space, right? And you actually need a lot of space with the DJI FPV drone too. That's another thing. I was honestly surprised that DJI came out with such a big, heavy drone for the market they were going after, and they didn't come out with something a little more small and compact. I think they still might, but that's where I think a little 4S, if you're just learning how to do it, you really can fly it in your backyard if you have enough space. A 4S you can fly under things like a trampoline. I have a trampoline my kids do in the backyard, and I would never try to do that with my 6S, I just think it's a great place to start. Versus
I would agree. Yeah, 4S. But I'm like, on the topic of like a heavier quad, I personally, I like slightly heavier quads that are, a little bit bigger. So my freestyle rig is all up probably 750. And you're right. Flying the smaller ones, they're a little driftier, right? And obviously as the propeller size gets big, the prop disc gets bigger, it's like more rubber to the road, so to speak. And you definitely have a lot more traction in the air. So it's grippier. It is harder to get into the larger quads, obviously. I would still recommend, like, if you're really going to get into FPV Acro, you might even want to consider, like, getting something smaller. Again, maybe even a 3-inch or a 4-inch. If you want to eventually graduate into the 5-inch, that's really where you're going to get, like, the best experience out of it, because it's the perfect, intersection of all of those performance metrics. But that's also where you're going to get the sensation of weight and momentum. And, mastering FPV in a lot of ways is really about keeping the drone in a state of perpetual motion and always perfectly managing and preserving its momentum. So the heavier quad that you have and the grippier props that you have, it's just that much easier to feel connected to it on the sticks.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I want to play the video you sent me here in just a second and let you talk over it. But we were talking about music earlier, and one of the things Rick Beato talks about a lot, and I believe as well, is that music is not just about the loud parts, it's about the quiet parts as well, and how those two contradict each other, and not contradict, complement each other, and make a song really, really great. And what you just said kind of said the same thing to me, is when you drop the throttle, that's just as important as when you push the throttle up, right? You're talking about the momentum and that ability to kind of do a slide or a curve do you know what I mean? Is that making sense?
Yeah. No, exactly. I love that analogy too. I mean, actually, chapter 26 was talking about freestyle genres, and I make the connection between music and freestyle, and I talk about how there's a certain consonance and dissonance with freestyle footage. So there's certain movements that you will do that do generate these sort of dissonant, visually grating feelings for your audience, but then there's also these very flowy consonant movements that generate that aesthetic appeal. And great freestyle is kind of a balance between the two of them, and exactly like you're saying, a great musician knows how to use silence, because it's sort of taking it away, and then allowing the audience to kind of sit in that absence of it, and then to come back in and to hit them with the music, with the sound that you're capable of creating. Yeah. And it's, same kind of thing in freestyle. You want to sort of, you don't always want to just be banging the sticks around and doing all this crazy stuff. Yeah. You need to be able to have a little bit more maturity to it and slow things down and feel okay with kind of just cruising and letting things be.
And let's talk about that for a second. Are you able to see what I'm showing, the video?
Yep, I can see it.
Cool. Yeah, so tell us what's going on here. I mean, obviously you're chasing a drift car, but give us some more details.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so this was an event that I did a couple of weeks ago. This was actually my very first time chasing drift cars. It's something that is on every FPV pilot's bucket list, and I finally got to do it myself. This was an event that was in Englishtown, New Jersey, and it was sponsored by the Club Loose Drifting organization. So these guys were really cool. Let me come out and do some filming. So these were just some of the highlights. It's actually incredibly challenging to do this, because you're trying to manage so many things at once. The thing with the FPV drone is that obviously we don't have any brakes. So I'm constantly having to feather the throttle while I'm staying behind them, because if I go too fast, I can't just slam on the brakes and slow down to stay behind them. So a lot of the times, I'm trying to watch what the driver's doing while also maintaining awareness of where I am. I don't want to hit any of the cones or any of the poles that are on the track. So like in moments like this where I'm like right on the guy's tail, I'm like so locked in on the throttle, and even just like a millimeter or two too much is enough to kind of send me over the top of the car and then ruin the shot. So it's really, really challenging to
And then you've got the barrier there on the side you've got to deal with, and you've got probably some things in the air like the telephone poles and such. All right, tree style. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, so like we were talking about before, this is the spot that I was talking about. This is one of my favorite spots. I've probably flown many, many hundreds of packs here, and this is kind of the style it's a style that I've been working on for a while. So, well, actually, here I'll tell you a funny story. I've been freestyling recently to classical music. And I made the mistake of telling one of my best buddies. I said to him, "Hey, you know what, man? I've been freestyling to classical, and I kind of want it to look almost as if like I'm figure skating." and thinking that my buddy would, being an FPV enthusiast himself and understanding, the medium of the quadcopter, would understand my artistic need for expression. But no, now he just laughs at me and calls me Twinkle Toes FPV.
That's awesome. Yeah, that sounds like my friends. That's how they would be. Yeah. Too. But I mean, I can see that here. You're doing these sort of spin arounds like you would on skates, and part of what good skater is smooth, right? I mean, they're just smooth, and they don't look jerky, and that's yeah, I can totally see where you're coming from. But yeah, it's a little I would make fun of you too.
It's fine. Yeah, but I mean, it's all about the fluidity of movement and really just, momentum control. Like with the look that I'm going for here is that I want to try and make it look almost as if like I'm a superhuman who is performing parkour through the park, right? So I fly on very low rates. Other pilots like Mr. Steele, for instance, will fly on rates that are like upwards of 1,100 degrees per second. So, I mean, when he bangs the stick, he's going to do, very, very fast. The screen is going to just devolve into this tornado of color. I don't like those types of movements, so I fly on rates that are about 550 degrees per second, which does limit what I can do. So you'll see in a lot of cases, like I'm doing sort of, these flippy floppies, essentially cartwheels just kind of through the trees. But that's the style that speaks to me. Guys that fly like, Ladrib or Bubby, for instance, that flow style, that's what I really like and want to emulate.
And for everyone who doesn't know, the rate is basically how many degrees it rotates in a second, right? So the yaw or the pitch or the roll, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So 360 would be one rotation per second.
Correct. Yeah. So if you were running 360 degree rates, then if you were to throw the stick to maximum deflection, so hold it, press it against the gimbal's walls, then the drone would rotate at one revolution per second. So, like I was saying, Mr.
Slow.
Steele.
Yeah, I mean that's really slow.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is, I'm assuming this is Velocidrone.
Right. So this is Velocidrone. This is actually just some footage that I took from a YouTube video that I posted up to my channel. So yeah, this is me just flying around on the tracks. This particular video was VRL season 3. So I was doing a fly through of all the tracks that were in that particular season, and then kind of offering commentary about it afterwards. But again, this is I recommend anyone, if you're really serious about getting better at FPV and you want to do it very quickly and very cheaply and very efficiently, then you got to get into the simulator and you got to get on a track, and you've really got to kind of force yourself to sit down and do this and grind out laps.
And you sped this footage up, right? This is like 300% or something.
No, this is all in real time.
Yeah. Wow. No, I knew that, but it just it's 10 times as fast as I could do it. But that's what practice is all about, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here is how do you get better? Actually, funny story. I actually used to go to this gym called Camp Gladiator, and they do CrossFit kind of stuff. And I can do curls all day long. My cardio is pretty decent. I can run, I could box, I could do all this stuff. But push-ups have just always kicked my butt, And I said to there was a woman, the instructor, I said, hey, why do I have so much trouble with push-ups? How am I going to get better at push-ups? She said, more push-ups.
Yeah, do more push-ups.
That's exactly what she said. I have one other question though regarding the drift cars. So you kind of positioned it as you were talking about the experience of they let me come out and they they were very kind and blah blah blah. I'm curious because I've never chased drift cars. I've done boats like water ski boats, and that's pretty, but it's usually a friend. But is it like you had to ask them and they were kind of doing you a favor, or which I think is always good to behave that way, or were they like, oh man, this footage is sick, thanks for doing this, man, I'm so excited that you could be here? Which was it?
Well, with these guys in particular, well, I don't know, it's kind of funny because I've been wanting to do drift cars forever. So I was actually just kind of cold calling every track in the area in New England, and I would on the phone with somebody. I'd be like, hey, I'd love to come by and like film at the event. Can I bring my drone and do film one of the drift events? And they're all like, no drones are allowed. But I'm like really good. I even wrote a book about it and stuff. And they're like, no drones allowed. They didn't want to hear about it. Right. So then actually I went on to Instagram, and there's another guy who's really cool. His name's Gino El Bujo FPV. He's a professional FPV pilot based in New York. So he does drift events again for this Club Loose organization that's at the Englishtown racetrack in New Jersey. So he flies there all the time. I just reached out to him and I was like, hey man, can I come to one of the events and do it? And he was like, for sure, I'm going to get you in. So that was that. These guys are super cool about the drones, and they're used to having them, buzz over their heads. So
and I suppose because they know the drone is there. If you did crash, you're gonna lose your drone probably. The odds of it getting destroyed are pretty high. But I don't know that anybody's going to get injured. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to cause the car to crash. The car's going to run over it. The car's going to hit it. I mean, you know what I mean? It's really the risk is on you as the pilot more than the. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I mean, if you saw the cars that a lot of these guys were driving, I mean, they're all pretty damn beat up anyway. So yeah. If my drone crashed into the side of it, I don't think anyone's going to care. I mean, there are people on the track. It could be a little dangerous if obviously you're flying over people, but yeah, I mean, it's generally safe. Yeah, you're right. The thing that's in the most danger is my drone.
Yeah, and your ego, and your pride,
and my ego. Yeah, exactly.
all of these things. Well, Christian, this has been fantastic. I don't know if anybody's got any questions. Let me just go back and open up the chat real quick. A lot of people. Joe Blaylock asked if you can do a triple Lutz. That's good, Joe. That's
I can certainly try.
Yeah. Rippin', nice flying, too fast for my eyes. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Well. Again, Christian, really, really cool to get to meet you finally. Great job on the book. If anybody hasn't gone out to check it out, it would be a great gift for somebody, but it isn't the kind of book that is just all text. And that's what I love about it, is all these diagrams make all these things so much more easy to understand. And if you are getting into FPV, or if you're actually just interested more in how drones work and fly, I mean, like even the whole concept of yaw, like how does that work? It's all explained in there. It's pretty amazing that when you think about it, that props spinning in a different direction and the gyroscopic, you know what I'm talking about. You could explain it, but buy the book if you want that. And also, Christian, you said you've got YouTube. You've also got Instagram. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. So my pilot handle is VESPULA FPV. I'm not sure if it's on the screen right now or not, but VESPULA. Yeah.
No, it's there. And guys, thank you very much to everyone who tuned in tonight. I definitely enjoyed this conversation, and I think, again, whether you want to get into FPV or not, it's always cool to meet people that are doing something that they love and they feel passionate about, right? Because that's what it's all about. Whether you're flying camera drones, flying FPV, or just want to hang out, this community is great for that, and it's a community where people are doing stuff that they love doing. This isn't work for any of us, right? I mean, I do these live streams and I put together YouTube videos because I love doing it. You wrote this book. We were talking about it before. This isn't a big moneymaker for Christian, but, especially considering how much time he put into it. 3,000 sounds like a lot of books, but when you break it all down, it's still not a whole lot of money. You could have been making more money doing something else by the hour, but you did it because you love it. You wanted to share your knowledge, and you wanted to kind of, like you said, go backwards. So you got the book, and now you're going to be a YouTube king. So good luck.
That's absolutely right, man. Yeah. Listen, thanks so much for the time, Kelly. I really appreciate it. It's a great conversation, man. I
really enjoyed it, and I will be in touch with you about Spin Up. You told me earlier that your brother lives in Austin, so I can't wait. Have you been getting an echo, by the way?
Yeah, the whole time, but I wasn't going to tell you on stream.
It's gone now, right?
Yeah, it is.
You should have told me. I could have fixed it. I just realized I was sending you an echo. Sorry about that. All right, man. Well, again, thank you very much for joining. I don't think anybody else was hearing the echo. This has been a lot of fun. If anybody is interested, Spin Up tickets are still on sale. It's dronespinup.com. It's November 6th. I will be announcing a lot more about that, who's going to be speaking and all that stuff.